Welcome to Sizzle Fantasy Sports, the channel with the most sizzling hot fantasy takes and analysis, presented by your host, Gavin.
Rodgers clean pocket, throws the middle to Etienne, touchdown, and a dagger!
How's it going, and welcome back to the SFS channel. My name's Gavin, and today I'm going to be talking about some running backs in 2021 fantasy football to keep yourself away from. These are guys that I think are being overvalued right now, and the places that they're being taken on draft boards are too risky based on the return I see them giving to lineups this season. So don't go anywhere. If you're new around here, head down and click that subscribe button, turn the bell on so you never miss an episode, and let's get started. Alright, as I go through today's video, if you have any more questions or want to learn more about these running backs, head over to sizzlefantasy.com and get yourself hooked up with one of the draft guide collections. Even if you don't know if you want to purchase access right now, head over there and create a free account, and you can decide whether or not you would like to get one of those packages later. I'll be doing draft profiles for every single fantasy relevant player this season, breaking down their situations, breaking down their talent, their skill set, and how I see that translating onto your fantasy lineups in the production category. So make sure to check that out, you guys. Let's get started here. My first player that I am not very excited about this season is Clyde Edwards-Helaire for the Kansas City Chiefs, the second-year running back, obviously taken the last pick in the first round in the 2020 draft, and I had really high expectations for this guy coming out of LSU last season. He was amazing if you remember back to that Week 1 performance against the Texans last season, and it looked like he was going to be in for a really great and really awesome productive year for the Chiefs, but then they just really peeled off the run game, and they stopped using him in high volume dosages throughout the season. It turned out to be kind of a letdown, and for a player that we saw get 20 plus touches in that game, he didn't really do that too much the rest of the season. So I'm worried about him this year. I don't think that CEH is a 3-down workhorse level back. This is a player that they want to use in gadget sets. They have play calls drawn up from absolutely, but he's more of a scat back. This is a player that I don't expect to see get those high levels of volume and production that you're looking for. And a player this size is eventually going to wear down and start to see some breakdowns in his game. He's going to get banged up throughout the season, and it's hard to depend on a player like that to play a full now 17-game regular season schedule for these players. So I'm a little bit worried. He's probably a high upside RB2 at best this season in his good weeks. More of a PPR play, so if you're leaning towards a standard league, you don't have much incentive for catching passes, absolutely stay away from Clyde, because this is a guy who is going to give you most of his top-end production, like I said, in that receiving game. He's not a big back, so he's not going to get those goal line carries. And the Chiefs brought in Jerick McKinnon, I think, to be more of their regular run set back, to do that first and second down, early down back type work and usage. So Clyde Edwards-Helaire, not a player I'm super faithful and confident in this season. I think there's a lot of better options out there at the particular ADP that he's being selected at, and we'll get into those players in another video, or you can go back and watch a previous episode of mine where I talk about some must-own players at their current ADP. My next player up here is Josh Jacobs for the Las Vegas Raiders. Jacobs is a player who I was super high on last season, and just like Clyde Edwards, he was a letdown. Josh Jacobs is a player who, throughout his first 2 seasons, we've pretty much learned who he is. He's not a very explosive back, and that's something that I think is really limiting his top-end potential here. He's a touchdown-dependent play. I think he's a very solid and dependable RB2, but what you want to see out of a player that you're investing the capital into, like a Josh Jacobs, is you want those RB1 numbers. This isn't a player who catches a lot of passes. He's not too productive in that phase of the game. And then you talk about a player who ran a 4.7 plus 40-yard dash. He doesn't get those explosive plays downfield. His first carry of 20 or more yards came in like week 16 last season, I believe. It was really late. So not something that's very encouraging to see. What sets apart a Nick Chubb from a player like a Josh Jacobs is they both get this high-end volume workload that we're looking for, but Josh Jacobs is a guy who might have 30 carries in a game and only 70 or 80 yards. So Nick Chubb gets those explosive runs. While he has even less receiving volume and work than Josh Jacobs does, he goes the extra mile to break away those long runs and have those really explosive downs. So Josh Jacobs, not living up to expectations, was a bit of a letdown last season after another, once again, like Clyde Edwards-Helaire. He had a hot Week 1 performance, but then he cooled off pretty darn quick. And then the Raiders brought in Kenyon Drake. He had 264 touches in 2020. That's obviously going to come down because he has to balance out somewhere with Josh Jacobs and the work that he has in this offense. But what that tells me is probably even a slight decrease in Josh Jacobs' numbers that he already wasn't doing too much with per touch. So I'm really worried about Josh Jacobs this season. I think he's another recipe for a big letdown, a big disaster. He'll have his nice games. If you're in a standard league, maybe this is a player that you lean towards, but any sort of a pass-catching format in PPR, I am absolutely off Josh Jacobs this season, who is currently going between the 3rd and 4th rounds. And I think that ADP slippage from last season is fair, but I think it should be even more extensive based off of the risk that is incorporated into his game. And then this is a huge dud for me, Travis Etienne. I think that we were all really let down with the comments that Urban Meyer has talked about with Travis Etienne. He wants to use him as an offensive weapon. We've seen Percy Harvin and what he's done with Urban Meyer in the past, and I think that's what Urban Meyer wants to turn Travis Etienne into. This isn't going to be the workhorse situation that we want Travis Etienne to be in Jacksonville. I just wrote about it in my rookie player profile for Travis Etienne, and we have something called the SFS Risk Radar, where we rate a player's risk rating out of 10, and I believe I gave Etienne a 6, and that was into my red high alert, very risky type player potential here. This is a guy who a lot of teams are taking, a lot of fantasy managers are drafting with the 4th or 5th overall pick in rookie dynasty drafts, maybe even higher. And I just don't think he's going to be the player that gets all of the touches there in that backfield, especially. They've been working him at wide receiver, splitting him out for passes. I think he's going to be involved a lot in jet sweep type plays and other gadgety roles. And Urban Meyer's come out and said that Carlos Hyde and James Robinson are taking the lead for the 1-2 punch in the backfield. So that leaves Travis Etienne as a 3rd down back type player, a guy who's going to come in and passing downs, and that's nice for Trevor Lawrence, but he's just not going to be the player that we want him to be from a volume perspective. Does he have the ability to break away after a catch, after a touch, and go the distance? Yes, but will he have as many opportunities as we'd like to see from him? No. So this is a big concern for me. Etienne's a guy who I was super high on coming into draft night for the actual NFL draft. I thought that he was going to find himself a really nice spot to go and produce, but the more I hear Urban Meyer talk, the less I like Travis Etienne's fantasy value for this season. So for that reason, I'm absolutely staying away from him this year. My next player is Melvin Gordon for the Denver Broncos in a contract year here, but the Broncos traded up in the 2nd round and took Javonte Williams out of North Carolina. To me, it's just a matter of time. Sooner rather than later, Javonte Williams will be the starting 3-down back for this football team. Melvin Gordon's had some lingering injury issues in the past. I'm not depending on him to get hurt this season by any means, but if that is to be the case, there's a chance he loses that starting role altogether. And while I think he'll have some really nice touchdown upside and he'll be used on the goal line frequently at the start of this season, it's a ticking time bomb, and 1 week he might be a solid low-end RB1. He finished as the RB12 last season. Maybe he's putting up high RB2 numbers for you while he's still the starter on this team, and maybe he does that for a few weeks. It'll be a nice production level from him, but the next week he could fall flat on his face, lose the starting role, lose all the volume, and you've got yourself a running back who doesn't have very much fantasy value anymore, and you're just kind of sitting duck. You're a sitting duck there, and you're kind of screwed. So Melvin Gordon's a player you can take on draft day. His ADP isn't crazy high, but I would highly encourage anyone. He's going to be probably featured in my first 1, 2, even maybe week 3 trade videos. If he has good games, I'm going to say sell high in Melvin Gordon. This is a player I want off my roster because of the risk of him losing that starting role, because they invested high-end draft capital into a running back who has a 3-down skill set. So I'm very worried about his long-term role this season. I think that, he's a free agent. Maybe he'll go elsewhere next season and get back off on a fresh set of footing there. But as a Denver Bronco, it was looking like a really nice situation with Phillip Lindsay leaving this backfield and it looking like Melvin Gordon was going to have that role more secure to himself. But with that draft pick, Gordon's a player I'm worried about here. And once again, I'm staying away from in fantasy drafts for 2021 fantasy football. David Johnson is my next player up on the list here. And while we're at it, you can slap the face of every other Texans running back onto this slide here. David Johnson and any other, Phillip Lindsay, Mark Ingram, whoever it is, I'm not drafting them. The Houston Texans running back and backfield as a whole is going to be an utter fantasy nightmare this year. These are guys who are old, they're washed up running backs, and they are frequently injured. David Johnson has always got something wrong with him somewhere. Phillip Lindsay is always having lower body issues. He's a smaller guy, so he gets banged up, and when they run him between the tackles, he gets he gets eaten alive by those big defensive linemen. And then Mark Ingram is just past his prime. He's been around the league for a while now, and he's probably not going to have too prominent of a role here. But nonetheless, these are players you're not going to be able to count on week in and week out. They're going to give nice numbers, and they're going to have spurts at times. And most likely it will be David Johnson, the guy who comes in and is that third down receiving back that has that role at the end of the games, because this is going to be a bad football team. They're going to be trailing games, especially if Deshaun Watson doesn't play. These guys are going to get absolutely smoked by almost every team they play this season. They're not going to be running the football, so there will be some value to be had based off of whoever that scat back, that third down back is, that's going to come in for those passing situations. But we're not going to be able to know who it's going to be on a week-to-week basis. Like I said, a lot of injuries are to be expected in this backfield. These are older backs, more injury-prone backs. That's why they went out and added so many of them, because towards the end of the season, this might be a really thin group. There might not be very many available bodies left to put out there, and they might have to bring in someone off the streets. So David Johnson, Phillip Lindsay, Mark Ingram, mark their names all in red on your draft day cheat sheets. I am not taking these players in my teams for the season. And speaking of cheat sheets, we'll be having for sizzlefantasy.com both draft guide collections. I'll be breaking down each position into tiers and rating them based off of that to help you have some better insight and organizational tools for your draft day preparation and whatnot. So if that's something you're also interested in, those are in each of the draft guide collections. You can either get the bundle with the redraft and dynasty content. We are not doing one large drop where we put all the information out there for you to access this season. It's being released as we put it in there. So the second I add in a player's profile, you will have access to click on that and soak up all the information regarding that player. It's not done yet. We've got a lot of work to do on that, but it's something we're working on. Eric, that is, and myself, every single day here, pumping more names in that list, updating our ranking sheets. I just spent hours the other day working on the rookie dynasty players and reordering my rankings, adding more players and names in there and some more information. So lots of good stuff in there. Go check out sizzlefantasy.com. You can get that draft guide collection, or you can get yourself an SFS Gold membership, which is our most premium content, where we've got some exclusive stuff for you to access. So moving on here, we've got a couple more players to talk about. Raheem Mostert for the San Francisco 49ers. He's going to be a super boom bust player this year, and that's not a player I love to have on my fantasy lineup. Raheem Mostert might potentially be putting up RB1 numbers for the first 4 weeks of the season, but then we're going to see him get dinged up and probably injured at the season's end here. It's happened each of the last couple of years. He's been a hot hand while he's been healthy and on the field, but he hasn't been able to consistently do that. So Raheem Mostert, I just talked about him and what I was mentioning Trey Sermon in one of my rookie dynasty videos. He's a player who is going to come out there and he's going to get his numbers while he's on the field, but I'm not sure how dependable and how consistently we can expect this from him. He was one of the most explosive backs in the league last season, one of the most productive players when he was healthy, but right when he got back on the field from his first injury, he found something new that was ailing him. So a lot of stuff to be concerned about here. I talked about Jeff Wilson Jr. as an injury-prone back as well, and he actually just tore his meniscus in the offseason here. So Trey Sermon's already climbing up the ladder for his potential to have touches this season. He'll be a sleeper for me for sure on draft day. If you're looking for a late-round running back who might be a league winner, a little bit of what would you want to call it, an Easter egg in this video, keep your eye out for Trey Sermon in the end of your redraft leagues this season. He's probably a player that's going to have a lot of opportunities at touches between the middle and end of this season based off of how this backfield seems to always have injuries just flooding through it. So Raheem Mostert, super, super high upside, but also a very, very shaky and low floor as well. So for that reason, I'm staying clear of him this season. And then finally, Myles Gaskin. This is a guy who's had, probably to a lot of people of their surprise, a lot of miles on his legs in his time in his college days. And we saw him get dinged up a little bit last season. He's a smaller back. He's a shifty guy that can be split out as a receiver and used as a dynamic playmaker in this offense. But from a holistic perspective, I'm not so sure that we can depend on Myles Gaskin here to play the full set of games for us. This is also a really tough defensively coached division, and I'm not sure that he's going to end up getting those workhorse numbers that we've seen. I expect this to be kind of a committee-style offensive backfield, to be honest. They just brought in Malcolm Brown from the Rams. He's a bigger bruising back. He might see some goal line work, snatch that away from Myles Gaskin here. And then Salvon Ahmed came in last season. He's still on the roster here. He's not a guy who I expect to steal a ton of carries from a Myles Gaskin, but he's a capable player that has earned his right to some touches in this offense as well. So Myles Gaskin was a really nice waiver wire find last season. I think that he's actually quite underrated and very talented, but those touches and whatnot, this offense, they're going to be trying to do a lot of stuff with Tua this year and figuring out if he's their guy or not. So I would just be a little bit concerned about Myles Gaskin, who I think is overrated right now based off of where he's being drafted on mock draft boards. All right, that was about 7 running backs that I am staying away from in 2021 fantasy football. By all means, if you have any questions about these players or others that you're looking to stay away from, or if you've just got a question about a player in general, shoot that down in the comment section below. I'll be sure to get back to you and give you my thoughts and insight based off of whatever you ask me. So feel free to ask away, whatever it is, fantasy football, I've got you covered. So thank you so much for tuning into today's video. If you haven't already, make sure to go check out those social medias at the top left-hand corner of your screen. And I'll see you guys next time. Peace out.